Put it in some honey as well. Do you have lemon? Drop it and a drop of lemon and honey.
Oh, okay, right. Didn't want it.
No, honey.
So take a little drop of.
Okay.
It's gonna taste right.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. Time to call the order of the Delaware City Council meeting for May 8, 2017. Mayor Riggle is running a little bit late due to another commitment, so we'll go ahead and get started without her. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here. Item number 2 on the agenda is the invocation given tonight by Nicole Ghazi of the Islamic Center of Delaware County, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you all rise, please?
In the name of God, the most gracious and the most merciful, from the 49th chapter of the Quran, praise be to the Lord of the universe, who has created us and made us into tribes and nations, that we may know one another. Let us be grateful for the opportunity to gather tonight in service to our city. Some of us in this room will work from within the power of government to bring about positive change. Today we give thanks for the support of our community, and we ask you, God, to protect and bless them as they take a stand for justice for all. Some of us here will work for change from outside these chambers, filled with the aspirations of what our community can be. Today we ask you, O Lord, for continued guidance to make us beacons of hope for all. Lord, please guide us to be the face of compassion, as we know this is the better way. Let us be open to each other's ideas, beliefs, and practices, knowing it is our diversity that is our strength. Give us the fortitude to demand not only justice for all, but dignity for all. Give us the strength to recognize that each of us holds value and has something to offer. Like the small bird who tried to douse the flames Abraham was cast into with a drop of water in his beak, we may not be asked by you, O God, if we put out the fire of hatred or not, but we surely will be held to account for what it is we did to help. And we ask you, O Lord, for your mercy and protection as we reflect on what each of us is doing to contribute to the greater good. Let us hope and pray that we may all carve out time to reflect on what matters to us most and then find ways to nurture what speaks to our hearts. That we may all open ourselves to feel the joy and the pain of others as if it was our own, for that is part of being human. And that we may celebrate what we have in common and honor our differences with a profound respect and kindness for all. And may we all aspire to be among those who bring healing, hope, and optimism to our community. With your grace and blessing, I say amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is approval of motion summary.
Exactly.
Approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held on April 24, 2017, as recorded and transcribed.
Motion to approve the minutes as recorded and transcribed.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary for the Shade Tree Commission meeting held on March 28, 2017. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary for the Planning Commission meeting held on April 5, 2017. Item C, acceptance of the motion summary for the Civil Service Commission meeting held on January 4, 2017. Item D, established May 22, 2017 at 7:20 p.m. as the date and time for a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 17-32, an ordinance approving an amendment to Chapter 1111 subdivision regulations of the Planning and Zoning Code pertaining to acceptance of public improvements and bonding. And item E, established May 22nd, 2017 at 7:25 PM as the date and time for a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 17-33, an ordinance approving a street vacation of Stratford Drive for Coglin's Crossing encompassing approximately 77.102 acres, zoned A1 PMU, agricultural district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located east of US 23, west of Stratford Road, and north of Meeker Way.
Thank you. What is the wish of council on the consent agenda?
I move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Keller, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 on the agenda is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have none, Mayor.
Mrs. Keller?
I have none.
Mr. Rohr? Mr.
Nothing to
Holder?
report?
Nothing, thank you.
Gosh, we've been lazy this week. Just kidding. We had a week off. I know. Oh, yes, you have a report for me?
I do.
Okay. Main
Okay.
Street, our new rep.
So we had our first Friday, last Friday, which was the first one for the season that we closed the streets down, which was not weather permitting very well. So
Weren't you in charge of rain?
yes, I tried.
Well, you
I wanted to leave early. But we did have originally over 50 vendors that were supposed to be there, so, which is wonderful. The farmer's market, the 2017 season will start on May 27th. And this year they'll be introducing the SNAP program, which the farmers will have the option to accept that or not. So,
SNAP.
Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Is that through Source Point?
Health Department.
the health
Health
department.
Department, okay. Sorry.
And.
And Source Point, okay. All righty, from now on, when the streets are closed and the city's involved, as they were this time, can you let us know to make sure that,
Sure.
not that I don't usually go to them anyways, but if the cities there, I'd really like to be part of it.
Right.
And I think this time there was fire, who's down there this time?
Walk a mile.
Walk a mile. But down here, we had some of our equipment, police.
I think it was just on
Yeah.
standby, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
I saw police, I saw sheriff. Yeah.
And it's part of the Walk a Mile, it's a support walk. And I know our police department handles that. We participate as well. Our units were there just in support
Okay.
of that walk.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you for your committee reports. Since you're the one that had one. Item 8 is fifth reading of ordinance number 17-16. If you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 17-16, an ordinance approving an amendment to Chapter 1168.07, replacement of removed trees of Chapter 1168, tree preservation regulations of the Planning and Zoning Code.
Thank you. Did you want to pick up now?
Madam Mayor, members of council, we provided you, we being Ted Miller and I, provided you an updated memo. Sorry to have missed the discussion at the last council meeting, had a family emergency, so obviously I missed that. But I think you probably had an opportunity to review that memo. And essentially, I think our message to you tonight is that we want to split the issue really for ourselves. Our recommendation is into two parts. One, the ordinance that's in front of you that is amending section 116807, replacement of removed trees, in about 3 or 4 sentences, clarifying it. As part of that, there was some discussion, I believe, about the sentence relative to at no time shall the fee be less than $100 per caliper inch required. Ted and I both feel that comfortable if you want to remove that sentence, but then continue on with the rest of the ordinance. It would not change how we administer the code, how we have administered the code for at least 12 years I've been here, and charged $100 a caliper inch. We would recommend it's an appropriate time that fee be captured in our fee schedule, like all the other fees. other than that, that ordinance has been through that, not ordinance, but those changes have been vetted through the Shade Tree Commission, Planning Commission, and us as staff, and everybody recommends approval of that at this time. And then the second issue for us would be just to make sure that we're clear with your direction on what next steps might be. If you want us to look at rewriting the entire chapter, we've heard many comments all over the place in terms of the existing chapter. So we would, if you were clear with that with us, we could go and scope out that process and what it would be. It would obviously involve a wide range of stakeholders. There could be an opportunity for just listening to comments from a wide variety of stakeholders and then making another recommendation to you, or it could be that you're satisfied with the existing code and just move along. Staff could be your direction, but we're looking for some clarity to that. Ted and I have been in communication with the Shade Tree Commission to answer some of their questions coming out of the memo, as well as I provided at least a communication with Jim Hills and the BIA to talk directly, but providing that same level of communication. Ted, did you want to add anything to that? Okay. So with that, we would recommend approval of the ordinance that's in front of you. Should you see fit to remove the one sentence, or amenable to that, that's at your pleasure, and then we would seek some direction from you for next steps. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, as you probably are aware, the Building Industry Association expressed some concerns, especially in situations where there's unusual situations and there may be a need for variance, and when that variance would apply, when it wouldn't apply. So I think my take on this, after talking with all the parties involved, is that I would move that we strike that one sentence with the idea that we're going to come back, hopefully with input from Shade Tree and yourself and BIA, and discuss the actual prices. Obviously, in the meantime, we're going to continue to charge the same thing we've always charged. It's just we're just not codifying that piece of it yet. I think it's important that we continue, as we have in the past, to preserve our tree canopy, but I also think that it's important to look and make sure that we're being fair and reasonable with our developers, because that's an economic benefit to the city, as the trees are. So my recommendation, Madam Mayor, is that we strike that one sentence and then ask staff to move forward with looking at the charges, and particularly where there may be room for variances in unusual situations. And that would be in conjunction, of course, with Mr. Owen and Shade Tree, so that all the parties are represented at the table.
Okay.
What would be the impact of striking that sentence? I mean, if it doesn't make any difference either way, why is it there in the first place?
Well, we were trying to capture the fact that we haven't charged anything less than $100 a cal per inch, and we have revisited that fee, at least in terms of what a tree might cost to buy, to transport, to plant, as our memo indicates in the first section. And frankly, we thought that had been captured in the fee schedule, but it's not there. It's probably, in re-looking at it and listening to the comment that came forward, it's probably the clearest to strike that sentence out of here, because it's not that clear in this section, frankly, and to make it very clear and put it in our fee schedule. And then if you want us to re-look at that, I mean, I'm very comfortable, having done research over the last 2 weeks and talking to Central Ohio communities, re-looking at our information, that we are one of the lowest cost per caliper inch communities that allow a tree fee. Not all of them do, around Central Ohio. Obviously, that's Central Ohio. There's other parts of Ohio in the country if you want us to look at that. But, I think there's no immediate impact to our existing processes with removing that sentence.
Madam
Answer your
Mayor,
question
may
directly.
I jump on top?
Yes, you may.
If you recall, Councilwoman Keller, in our fee ordinance schedule, we're supposed to review them every year in conjunction with our budget. So if you were to strike this out, I think that time would be the time we would put it in, the November, December budget time. And that's not that, honestly, in ordinance time, that's not that far away. And as Dave said, we've been charging that amount now, but we would just wrap that into our annual review of the codified ordinances.
Yeah, and I think looking at some of the other codes, some of the issues, not so much we get down into the weeds very quickly here, guys, into details. But a lot of it is not so much what you charge for a tree or caliper inch, but how you, what you count.
Yeah.
That results in a charge or a tree bill. Really, the requirement under our code at the beginning and the end is that if you take a tree out, certain size, caliper inches, you replant those on site. That's the requirement. The code then allows you to satisfy that requirement in a number of ways. Replant on site being the preference. Plant off site, there's some changes in here to clarify that, or make a payment in lieu of planting. And this is, again, this is the base code, and you've seen a lot of plan developments come through lately that have their own schedule for tree replacement, dealing with those unique sites in a lot of ways, trees being one of them.
Can you refresh, give me the sentence again, what we keep talking about?
It's,
I have it right here,
it's
Dave.
on page 3 of 4 on mine of the revised proposal near the bottom of the page, again on mine. It's 116807A3, tree bank fund option. And the sentence says, at no time shall the fee be less than $100 per caliper inch of required replacement.
Okay, which is the current.
Can you,
That's the current proposed
Where is that?
revision.
That's the question I have is I read 1168 and I read the fee schedule and I can't find that fee anywhere mentioned there. And so I don't,
Well, it's not. That's one of the things they were trying
so
to
it's
clean
charged
up.
by convention and not by ordinance. Is that?
Correct. That's correct.
Well, I'd also be curious to see that list of other communities and what their fee schedule is, because again, for me, in my opinion, we got to do what's best for Delaware. To me, that just seems like a ploy by the developers to try to have, to pay less fees for, and take away our trees, and then they always use the same thing. And they say, oh, well, the other communities have smaller roadways. It's just a matter they want to pay less for roadway. This to me just seems like to pay less to take away our trees. So I'd like to see what the Central Ohio communities have.
Hey, Councilmember, I think that's why we're really recommending to you to split those discussions, so that I don't think doing what you said impacts necessarily passing what's in front of you this evening, in my opinion. You could then, in sort of phase 2, if you will, direct us to go off and provide you that information. Councilman Schaefer said, take into account the shade tree and the BIA's comments as well, do more of a full review of the section, which would be my recommendation. Because again, it's not so much what is charged. I can tell you that after looking at this for a number of years, whether you do it by tree, which a lot of communities do, or you do it by caliper inch, which we do and a lot of communities do. It's more how you calculate the trees that count towards that. So, does the bill run up fast? Does it not? Do you count right-of-ways? Do you not? Do you, that sort of thing. But obviously, that's a work program item for Ed and I in our shop that is going to require some effort.
Really, I think just echoing those comments from Dave, we're receiving payments now in lieu. And I think we want to clarify how those dollars can be spent. That's why the language in front of you talks about the funds can only be used for planting and installation of trees on public property. It's not clear in the current ordinance. This clarifies that. So there's no issues with respect to how monies are being dispersed. And that's why, that was really the impetus for this.
That's correct.
It was really just that, was to clarify money's coming in, we're getting a considerable amount depending on what the development is. We need a way to track it, a way to respond to a question of how you're spending it. The current code really doesn't really clarify that. This would. And so that's why I think why the two-part recommendation.
And then it became a discussion that seemed to us to be much broader than just sort of that narrow prescription that Tom just described well.
Right, it was scope creep. I mean, because as we said on Shade Tree, that was the whole thing. Shade Tree just wants to say, how can we make certain that the money that's received is used just for trees and it's not, or we want to use it to put on a tree TV show or something, whatever it was, and they wanted clarification on that. And that's what that gives us. And then we got this scope creep and we're going on all these other ways. So can we just separate this? Can we just kind of put this to bed, please?
Do we have a recommendation from the Shade Tree Commission on the ordinance as it sits? Because as of today, it seemed like there was even still some confusion, and that worries me about moving forward.
The Shade Tree Commission Chairman's here, if you come up. The Shade Tree Commission had a number of months of discussion of the changes. So changes were made as a result of that discussion from the original proposal of staff, I think. And then they recommended approval. It went on to Planning Commission because this is a change amendment in the zoning code, and they evaluated the changes and recommend approval as well. So really the only thing at bar here that's a little different is the one sentence with respect to the no less than $100 fee, which again doesn't say the fee shall be $100 per caliper inch. It just says it shall be no less than, which is why as we review it, that's not as clear as we would have in hindsight liked it anyway.
And that
Make
won't
it clear,
change
it should
that.
be in the fee schedule.
And that wouldn't change, Councilwoman Keller, what we're doing.
No.
If that's deleted tonight by council, that's not going to change. It doesn't go to $50. It doesn't go to $150.
No.
It stays, as Councilman Rohr pointed out, we've been doing that by convention, and it would remain that, and then we would codify it at the appropriate time of adopting our fee order.
Correct.
Yeah, I
Why
think
don't
there
we
was some, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
I think there was some
okay.
confusion because people were thinking if you delete that line, are we now deleting the need to pay? And that's not the case. But I think that's where the confusion came from because it looks like, oh, wait a minute, now you're not charging people that.
I agree with you.
What I'm attempting to do with my motion is separate what we do with the money and how that all works from the fee schedule, and give us more time to look at the fee schedule and come back with recommendations about not only the amount, but all the other issues that in terms of how we calculate how many trees and all that. That'll give us, we're just doing it in two pieces. We're passing everything that has to do with how that money flows and how that system works. We're just asking to come back to council for a second time with information on how we price it. Particularly, it's not just so much the caliper inch, but how we treat various situations in terms of how we calculate that out. So we're just looking to do two separate pieces.
Yeah.
And that second piece, that second piece was never actually included in the original, what we're talking about to begin with anyways. So I mean, it's a whole
We definitely
separate
not
issue
set
on
off to
itself.
look at the whole chat. I'm kind of sorry that we brought these forward, really, at this
How could
point.
you are?
But, I do what I'm told, so.
I'm still not understanding how it affects nothing to remove this sentence.
Because it doesn't change the past practice or convention or the data behind it to charge $100 per caliper inch, which has been, by the way, in my opinion, I think you've heard a different opinion from audience members, it's been pretty consistent unless you're talking about a plan development or a PMU today, or something like that with its own schedule.
For me, I don't feel comfortable removing it until I have something written that would replace it. I just don't see why.
That may,
The one thing, Councilwoman, is that it doesn't set the fee. It doesn't say it shall be $100 per caliper inch. It says it just won't be less than that. And I think Ted and I are re-looking at it and listening to some of the comments. If we're looking at a plan development, we don't want to get in a situation where that harangues us from making its own fee schedule in an individual plan development, where someone could come back and say, well, it says you can't charge less than $100 caliper inch, and somehow I can calculate this out in this particular development to arrive at less than that. You have to do a lot. I'm telling you, you can get right down to the details here, but I can turn anybody's tree code into a caliper inch fee, even if they just charge by fee, by tree, and I know their minimum tree size, I could turn that into caliper inches and get apples to apples, but not everybody charges it. I don't think you're losing anything. I really don't. That's my recommendation of taking that sentence out, and it lets us put this part to bed. And then you certainly, it sounds like maybe you still have a debate on what you would like us to do next.
My concern is what the Planning Commission and the Shade Tree Commission both recommended to have this sentence in here.
I understand.
And I don't know as much as they do about trees, so I just feel nervous about removing that sentence.
Well, let's have Paul come forward. He chairs our shade tree. And I appreciate everything you guys do, Paul.
Hello, give you my address and all that.
Yes, ma'am.
Paul Olin, 219 North Sandusky Street, Delaware. Yes, it was very confusing, and for some of the reasons that you mentioned. And I was very, very concerned about all this, and still am very concerned about this, until a couple very helpful emails from Ted that clarified the situation. And so I immediately, after I understood the separation of these two issues, I immediately called Elaine and emailed Elaine and had her schedule a complete examination of all our tree replacement policies for the next Shade Tree Commission meeting on May 23rd. So we're going to talk about everything, and fees are going to be one of them. And it may turn out that if we do the calculations correctly, we may end up with higher fees. Who knows? But we're going to look at this in a comprehensive way once we get past this. And we're going to try to find out what exactly James Hills of the BIA wants. Hopefully he'll be at one of our Shade Tree Commission meetings. So the next one in May, we're going to talk about this in a comprehensive way, the how and why of the tree replacement policies that we have in place. And then I've already started to make out a list of questions for that today. And we'll have more questions, and then we'll submit those to Dave and Ted and invite whoever would like to show up, and hopefully James Hills will be one of them, to our meeting in June, and we can go from there. But believe me, I was every bit as concerned, as you were at because I'm not a lawyer. I don't have all day to look at this stuff. I have another job and everything. So, but after getting through it, and it did take a while, and it took several explanations, I'm satisfied with what's happening here tonight, knowing that this is separate. And it was really just, as George pointed out and someone else pointed out, this just originated as how we are able to spend the money. And that was the original issue. This is a painful and confusing process, but once we get through this, I think we're all going to be a lot better off, and we can get to something really solid and believe me, it's going to be done right with scientific, botanical, horticultural, civil engineering considerations, all that taken into consideration, long-term costs created by development, which aren't on the books. All that kind of stuff is going to be looked at very closely, because that's one of my pet peeves with regard to development, is there are many, many long-term costs to our community that are not on the books when that development takes place. So we are going to focus on all that. So that's where I'm at right now, and it's been a tough, confusing issue so far, but I think we're getting through it. So any questions?
So you feel comfortable with the removal of that sentence that we've been discussing?
Yes, based on the response that I got from Ted Miller, and I can forward you that email.
I was forwarded it today.
Yeah, there was a lot of emails.
I have to admit,
Okay.
I'm having trouble really following all of it too, and trying to connect the dots and making sure I really understand it.
Right,
And
right.
Well, what does the Shade Tree Commission think? Because
Well, last night I was very anxious about the whole situation. And I feel much more reassured today, and I'm thinking that it wasn't the most clear way of going about doing this, but this is what we have. And I think it's fine to get through it this way. And then really what we really need to settle on is getting it codified. I think that was one of your concerns. And the system in place without any ambiguity. And that's what we're all dealing with right now, is that this has never been done before. It's just been sort of thrown together, and yeah, this is what we were doing, and we're going to continue to do this. But that the elimination of that sentence, from my understanding, and as our attorney pointed out, does not eliminate the fee, does not eliminate the fact that we are going to charge that fee. That is not going to fly. I'll tell you that right now. Not with the Shade Tree Commission at any rate, at this point in time. So to answer your question, yes, I'm okay with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all you do.
Madam Mayor, I just have another follow-up question. We're discussing the placement of trees. My question that I keep getting hung up on myself is under section 116806, under the removal of major trees. No disrespect to Mr. Eflin, but it says that the director of planning and community development says or designee may approve the cutting down, remove or destruction of major trees, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we have an arborist on staff. I would think there would be input from the arborist as opposed to the director of planning and community development.
Yeah, and I can assure you with each of those decisions, there is input from the arborist.
Well, I'd like to see it spelled out.
Because I see it, but yeah, that is one thing we might look at as well.
And also going to the very, under item 5, or sorry, under, just right above that, it says removal of tree shall be deemed removed if one of the following occurs, and lists 5 things. But again, to me, that's something should be under the the advice of the arborist or something. I mean, again, no disrespect to Dave, but I mean, is he an expert in if the root system is damaged or inflicted by something or another? I mean,
Yeah,
to me, it should be spelled out.
Yeah, or at
better.
least made more generic in that it's the city of Delaware.
Right.
I agree. If we were to, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to the public hearing on the subdivision section at your next meeting, we tried to make some of those older references a little bit more generic. But again, we weren't looking at that and making these particular changes.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see them all changed at one time as opposed to coming back and do it.
One thing I'd note, Councilman, is that the chapter is a little confusing in that it says you can remove some of these trees, but even if we allow you to remove those trees, you still have the responsibility to replace them. So it's really just an allowance to remove them, but it doesn't obviate your responsibilities for replacing them as well. Which is
Side note, I have no issue with the removal of that line either.
What do you want, all the changes made at once then? I mean,
If we're going to do it all at one time, I mean, if it's coming back to us again, I would assume we'd just get it all done at one time.
Well,
Is it all right to do this tonight?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments? I'm just afraid to ask. Okay, what is the wish of council then? Let's get reading.
I'm going to make a recommendation that we start the one sentence that Mr. Evans recommended. At no time shall the fee be less than $100 per caliber inch of required replacement.
Second.
Okay,
Motion to amend?
that is a motion to amend.
Motion.
Okay, so I have a motion to amend by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Are you sure, Lisa?
No, I'm not sure, but I'll just, I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable.
We're good.
In that case, I'll move for the approval of ordinance 17-16 as amended.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, we need to jump to item 10.
Yeah, that's fine.
Which was public hearing for 7:15, and I'm sorry, but we're a little late. So if you'll please read this into the agenda.
Ordinance number 17-29, An ordinance repealing and replacing Section 929 of the City of Delaware Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code, establishing general rules and regulations for the collection of refuse.
Mr. Farino.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I have with me tonight Joe Bull, Superintendent, Public Works, as well as Terry Davenport, Supervisor of the refuse operations. And we're here just to really address any questions you may have regarding a proposed change in our refuse code. If you recall, we spent some time earlier this year presenting our refuse collection operation. We presented rate increases, which were subsequently approved. The proposed changes to code were kicked back to our Public Works Utility Committee for consideration. With direction from that, we're back here tonight with some proposals within the refuse code for consideration and public hearing tonight. I want to just be real brief of what the entire section was rewritten as opposed to just one section addressed, because after looking at it, there are sections of the code that were created 45 years ago, and it was really disjointed, the whole presentation of the code. We decided, after the advice of our attorney, just rewrite the whole thing, clarify it, update it, get your terms correct, your means, methods, and operations correct in here. So that's why we're seeing it as a rewrite. But things that were physically changed were, we defined a bulk item because we have the bulk item collection. Most importantly, while we probably have some folks here tonight to talk, we defined better our residential customers and commercial customers. We defined what a multifamily development was under dumpster service and allowed those by this code to be considered as a commercial customer, which does allow them to seek private refuse collection service, where currently their only option is public city collection service. And then we also added one section that some of our tenants, some of our buildings that have multiple different uses and tenants within them are difficult to track when people come and go. So this section would allow us, if we have difficulty, to bill the owner of that building for all the refuse collection instead of trying to track down all the individual tenants as they come and go. So those are the substantive changes tonight. We did notify all of the multifamily development properties of this meeting tonight. I believe there's at least one gentleman here tonight to speak regarding this. I did receive a few phone calls and got support basically for allowing the multifamily developments with dumpster service to be considered a commercial business and subsequently allowing them to go ahead and seek private collection if they so desire. I can answer any questions regarding this, and so can Joe and Terry if we have any, or we can go to the public hearing.
Any questions? Okay, we'll open up to the public. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this? Please come forward to the microphone and give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Brian Lyle, and I'm from 131 Rock Creek Drive, Delaware, Ohio. I'm with Hayes Colony, who you guys heard from Lincoln last time. He kind of had the numbers. I don't really have a whole lot to say. We just want to say we appreciate you guys taking the time to look at this. We're excited about the possibility of obviously being able to bid it out, and gives us the ability to compete better in the business world. And that's really it. We just want to let you know we were here and interested.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and take this to a third reading since it involves taxpayers' money. Okay.
Madam Mayor,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman.
No, you go right ahead.
Lincoln Center did also submit in writing his,
okay.
so I wanted to be able to submit that to the clerk tonight as well. It really echoes the comments we just heard.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Mr. Farino for the tremendous amount of effort and thought that's been put into being willing to just take a look at this and seeing what the city can do and working with our residents. And it's been a great process. And I thank you and your staff for the great job that you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take this to another reading in 2 weeks. And item 11 is 720 public hearing. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 17-30, an ordinance amending section 521.08 of chapter 521 of the codified ordinances of the city of Delaware, Ohio, establishing authority to remove litter and the right to an appeal of a notice of violation.
Mr. Freeman?
Again, that's me. This is follow-up really to conversation almost a year ago that Councilwoman Keller initiated regarding downtown refuse collection. Our code currently in the littering code requires written notification and attempts to get a hold of the violator. The proposed change here simply allows the city, through the city manager, to see an issue, and if it's so desired, doesn't require, but if so desired, that we need to get that rectified immediately, he can so order Public Works to go ahead and remove, whether it's trash bags downtown or something that got dumped downtown, without having to follow the entire process. It doesn't throw the process out for if we have repeat violators. We can still follow the code, provide notifications, and fine them if they are continued violators. But it does provide a legal mechanism now for us to go ahead and act quickly when it's deemed necessary. One other section, this is a term, is that we do have an appeals section added as well, just in fairness to anyone who is cited for violating. They have a method to be able to appeal that.
Bill, it might be worth just explaining. So on the immediate appeal, the way you wrote it, we took out the hammer on that one, but it does give us the power to pick it up.
Correct.
But we don't have we were hung up before on issues of proof and mailing someone with the bill, and so this allows us to pick it up, but we'll address that issue later. But for the repeat offenders, we could go through the normal process, but then we built in
Correct.
an appeal process, so even they would have an opportunity to be heard. Is that fair, Bill?
Yes, thank you, Darren.
Questions for Bill? All right, seeing none, we'll open it to the public. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this tonight? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Would council like to vote on this tonight? You want to take it to another reading?
I'm good tonight.
Okay.
I lost it though, I'm sorry. Give me just a sec, where are we? Number 11, okay, so I suspend the rules requiring 3 readings of ordinance number 17-30.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move for the approval of ordinance number 17-30.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. At this time, we'll move up to item 9, which is the second reading of resolution 17-29.
Resolution number 17-29, a resolution accepting the Parks and Facilities naming and dedication policy.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. This is it's been before you before. If there's any questions, I can answer those.
Short and sweet. Any questions for Ted?
This came about as a result of a request we received for the renaming of the East Side Park last year, and the Parks Board at the time, I think, was supportive of that, but Ted's recommendation, it was that we establish a formal policy that we use to establish the criteria by which we would evaluate whether to accept the recommendation or not, and this would allow that. It is just for parks and parks facilities. It really doesn't address city facilities or city monuments and things like that. So that's probably something that needs to be addressed at some point.
Just for clarification, so if I follow the process here, the recommendation goes through the Parks and Rec Board.
Correct.
But this body can bypass the Parks and Rec Board.
The recommendation would come to you.
Yeah,
If this body decided to, it doesn't have to go to the Parks and Rec Board and then back to us. That's what I'm trying to get at.
well, it would come through the Parks Department, and then we'd take it to the Parks Board, who would make a recommendation to this council, and then if this council rejected it.
You're not following me.
You're asking if you can skip.
Yeah, I'm asking if we can skip the Parks Board.
Oh,
this body decides, it makes no sense to, if Carolyn comes in and says, hey, I think we should so-and-so, we have a discussion in open session, it makes no sense to go to the Parks Board and have them recommend, we just recommend it to do it.
Well, I think the process is built in part to honestly keep some of that from happening because we want to make sure that we're following all, but no offense, but just to make sure you're following all the criteria and that's why it goes through that vetting process. So I don't know off the top of my head to answer to your particular question, Councilman Jones, but I know the point of the process is to make sure that it's going through that vetting as opposed to a quick, one person says we do it, it just happens. Otherwise, pretty sure we'd have Shulman Park right now, right?
Correct.
Is that fair, Ted?
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
And then it goes to the process and comes back to council. Council rejects the naming. It's that body, does the Parks and Rec Board have any, like a planning commission type vote?
No, they can't overrule what you do.
No, it would just, the process would have to start over.
I have an issue, Madam Mayor, with the sentence that the person, it's in under 6.4, a person must be deceased for a minimum of 1 year. Because in a case, let's say our Councilman DeGenova situation, if we had been trying to name a park after him, we would not have been able to do that. What difference does it make how long a person has been deceased?
Well, I think the reasoning behind that is it helps to kind of take that sharp emotion out of something. Oh, something happened. Oh, crocodile tears, all this and that. Let's do something right now. I think over the passage of time, it helps to allow more logic and more reasoned influence to determine if maybe what you're doing. I just think it helps mellow that decision making process.
Too. I think that when
separation.
Right.
But, to what Tom had stated earlier, my conversation with Tom earlier today, I really think, although I like this policy overall, I think it needs to be not a park-specific one, but I think it needs to be a city asset, citywide asset naming. If Tom ends up being our city manager for another 40 years, he's the longest serving city manager in the nation, and we decide to name the town hall, Holman Hall, we need to have something there to do that. And I just don't think, I think separating this out into just parks and recreation facilities versus citywide assets, I think we could take a broader view and allow that to cover everything. In which case it would come back and also it would have been something that if it hadn't been in place, it could have influenced the naming of the airport, Jim Moore Field. Would it come into play in something like that? Because obviously that's not a park or recreation facility, but it would be something, a guideline that would have been in place that would have been followed in those instances also.
I don't know that I want the facilities to follow this exact criteria. I'm okay for parks right now. I think we need to relook at it. I think the naming of the airport was timely. And I don't regret doing that for 1 second. So,
yeah, you rename the field.
Yeah.
This is unrelated, but I think I'll just point out that Ted and I have also been working on a sponsorship policy because we get not the same thing as the Tom Mahal that we will name after 40 more years, but there are companies that would come and say, hey, I would like to sponsor this bench and I want my brand name on it, or I want to sponsor this park and have my business name on it. And we've been working on a separate policy for that, which is different than naming the park after that, but you still have to have a similar conventions. And I know Ted's had some samples that we played with, but we're not done with that yet, are we?
No,
Ted, that's the next evolution, but that's another realm where we kind of got to get up to speed with making a little bit more criteria and clarified so you don't treat some companies different than others and things like that.
A little more selective.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this one? What's the wish of council?
I'll move for approval on resolution 17-29.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Rohr. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Moving on to item 12, which is consideration of resolution 17-30. Elaine, if you'll please read this in the record.
Resolution number 17-30, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an amended agreement with Delaware County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to coordinate emergency management activities within Delaware County.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Today, we're bringing before you an agreement. This is an amended agreement with Delaware County Emergency Management and Homeland Security, and it's dealing with a modification of the funding. Delaware County Emergency Management and Homeland Security is overseen by a board made up of elected and also appointed officials here in Delaware County. I serve as the city's representative to that board. One of the things that we have been watching over a period of time has been a decrease in the amount of grant funding being provided to emergency management agencies, both locally and at the state level. Delaware County's grant funding comes not only from the state, but also the federal government as well. And that is in part some of the funding. The other is made up by funds provided by the local governmental agencies, including the city of Delaware, and also from Delaware County. This is a regional approach, so it's a really cost-effective and efficient way of providing the funding. As part of that, the cities and also the other local governments, when I say local governments, I'm talking municipalities, townships, and so forth, have been paying at a rate of 40 cents per capita. The county has been paying at a rate of 20 cents per capita. So all in all, we're paying 60 cents overall. But this has been based on per capita. So as there's been growth in our county, we've seen an increase, but it has not met with the increase in the cost of running emergency management, tied in with the decrease in the amount of funding being received. So the board has looked at alternative ways. We feel the mechanism of the 2/3, 1/3, that being the 40 cents and 20 cents is still the right approach. But what we have recommended and have brought forth in this agreement is a change. Instead of a per capita, the cost that is needed to run emergency management that is brought forth before this board and approved would be based on this 1/3, 2/3 funding. So with that, we are recommending approval of this ordinance, or this resolution, I should say.
Has this been brought before the county?
I'm sorry?
Has this been brought before the county?
It's being brought before every single municipality. I did not follow what the county has done because I know it's been going on in all the jurisdictions over the past month.
Madam Mayor, I move for the approval of resolution 17-30.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Jones, a second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Abstain.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And item 13 is consideration of ordinance number 17-31. Elaine, if you please read this. Tom's over here whispering in my ear.
Ordinance number 17-30.
Sorry. Can't do it now.
I think we lost her.
Broke Elaine.
It's just the whispering in the
He
ear.
whispered it was dead, and I thought he said it's dead. I'm like,
I'm sorry.
oh my gosh.
Okay, great. Ordinance number 17-31. An ordinance amending the 2017 appropriations ordinance. to provide funding for completing a multi-use trail extension on the Springfield Branch Trail and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. That this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city for the further reason to provide timely construction of the new trail extension, and as such will be in full force and be in effect immediately upon its passage.
Mr. Miller?
Madam Mayor, City Council, this is, if you remember, there was a contribution made, I think last year from the hold, and that contribution, we're looking at getting that contribution now to complete this trail connection per the exhibit, which we connect from the intersection of David Street and Ross Street to Todd Street. It's a small segment, and working with Bill Farino, we would do this project in-house, and the cost estimate is at $14,000. So we use those funds to buy materials.
And this is the Howell interest rate.
Howled, myself, sorry.
You have the same problem he does.
I can't say it. And this is the long-awaited, much-anticipated connection that gives us the ability to go from Springfield Branch Trail really out to the community center. Some of this will be on trail, some of this will be on road, but it will allow that connection. And that was one of the big objectives of the bike plan, was connectivity, and this will provide that.
Nowhere near the Delaware Run, is it?
No, it is not.
Go back to that one.
Part of it's on the Banner Rail line, and then the other part's along the property boundary.
We should point out that the Springfield Branch Trail does go behind a number of residential properties.
Any questions for Ted? What is the wish of council? Can you take this to another reading, or you want to?
Is this a first read?
It's only been hanging on for 10 years, 12 years.
Yeah, it's fairly non-controversial, I would.
Are there any residents that are going to object?
In fact, they've been out actually on Todd Street, and I think the feedback has been positive, according to Mr. Farino, who I spoke to this morning.
Do we take it at least to one
You
more?
could, sure. Yeah.
It's only been 12
Good take
years.
is, everything we heard was, we like every part of it, but that. Should be smooth.
I think to be safe, you probably should take it to one more reading, just given the amount of.
Well, this actually would be parallel to
Okay, let's move on to item 14, was this consideration of ordinance 17-32?
Ordinance number 17-32, an ordinance approving an amendment to Chapter 1111 subdivision regulations of the Planning and Zoning Code pertaining to acceptance of public improvements and bonding.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this will be presented at your next regular meeting unless you have any questions this evening.
For public hearing, right? Wait for a second. Okay. Item 15 is consideration of ordinance 17-33. Keep going.
I don't want to say it. She's going to write about
You can,
all three.
you can read all of them, 15, 16, 17.
Ordinance number 17-33, an ordinance approving a street vacation of Stratford Drive for Coglin's Crossing encompassing approximately 77.102 acres, zoned A1 PMU, agricultural district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located east of US 23, west of Stratford Road, and north of Meeker Way. Ordinance number 17-34, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat for Coglin's Crossing encompassing approximately 77.102 acres, zoned A1 PMU, agricultural district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located east of US 23, west of Stratford Road, and north of Meeker Way. Ordinance number 17-35, an ordinance approving a final development plan for Coglin's Crossing Phase 1 infrastructure encompassing approximately 77.102 acres, zoned A1 PMU, agricultural district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located east of US 23, west of Stratford Road, and north of Meeker Way.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the street vacation requires a public hearing, and so we'll present all three of these cases to you at your next regular meeting. It is the first final phase of Coglin's Crossing, which in this case would just be infrastructure, a little bit different or unusual for us. We normally see a building with the first phase, but this would be just infrastructure. So we'll present those and have the applicant here at your next meeting. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Eckler? Okay, we'll move on to item 18 then, consideration of ordinance 17-36.
Ordinance number 17-36, an ordinance amending the 2017 appropriations ordinance to provide funding for debt issuance costs associated with the various purpose improvement and refunding bonds series 2017 issued by the city and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide timely payment of bond issuance costs, and as such will be in full force and be in effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Mr. Stelzer?
Thank you. As I mentioned at the last city council meeting, we were able to effectively sell our bonds a couple weeks ago, a portion of which was refunding bonds, refinancing a 2006 issue, and our net present value savings were over $500,000, so it was a successful issuance. Originally planned for the latter part of 2016, and ultimately because of market changes, we elected to wait for rates to come back down, which pushed it into 2017. Consequently, we didn't have an appropriation in 2017's budget. The bond issuance costs are pretty typical of any time we go to market. It's a much more involved process, but this supplemental provides the appropriation to make sure the various entities involved get paid. We do have a closing on the issue scheduled for Wednesday. I entertain any questions council members may have.
Any questions? Seeing none. We need to probably approve this with emergency clause if you're going to have a closing on Friday or Wednesday.
So move to suspend the rules requiring three readings in ordinance 1736. Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move to adopt the emergency clause in ordinance 1736. Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move the adoption of ordinance number 17-36. Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, give us a good rate there, Dean. Item 20 is city manager's report. We're going to skip 19.
Yes, a couple of matters. City Attorney Shulman had put in a memo on Friday regarding the 2 liquor permits that we had, 2 hearings that we had requested. And we're asking for your just consent to move forward with the appeal of the full up. That was the one that the police chief and his staff had recommended against. They have granted it subject to an appeal. So if council's not an objection, we will move ahead with that. The other one was for the local restaurant Flying Pig. There was an issue, a mix-up on social security numbers, and we're recommending that we not appeal that one. That was approved as well. So I don't know if there's any, you want to elaborate on that at all?
You did an excellent job of describing the questions that we have. The reason we don't recommend appealing the Flying Pig, if you recall, there wasn't any substantive objections from the police report, but we felt that issue with social security number was one that we wanted to make sure the Liquor Commission was aware of. We conducted the hearing, just told them the information, so there wasn't a substantive problem with that. So we would not want to appeal that one. The full up, there have been substantive problems there, and we would recommend at least trying to do the appeal.
So is that?
I agree.
Is that-
I would like to appeal that one.
resolution.
Would you like a motion? Should we do a?
I don't think we necessarily have to, but if you want to make, because there's no like formal form we do, I just got to fill out a thing. But if you wanted to do a motion to appeal the full up, I certainly will take that under advisement. I think with the other one, we can just let it go.
Right.
I'll make a motion to appeal the full up finding.
Second.
So a motion by Mr. Rohr, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I will work with the chief and we'll draft up the best appeal we can.
Thank you.
Okay, second item, the JED distribution. We did get your feedback, so I will relay that back to the administrator in Berkshire Township and see where that takes us. There might still be some negotiation there. I'll have to find out. I'll let him know what the consensus here is, and that's that 25%. So, but
Why do they suddenly think they should be able to change it?
well, the
We're not changing it. This is a new JED they're proposing. The current JED at the Outlet Mall will remain the same, and no one's ever talked about changing that.
This is if, even outside the area that we agreed to, other areas that they're looking at coming in. And that changes because some of the villages, some areas no longer, they were originally part of it. That's why the distribution is the way it is today. But I'll follow
Just by
up.
way of comparison, Tom, do you mind if I just?
No, that's fine.
By way of comparison, we did ask their attorney to give us just some comparables of other JED splits in the area. Let me just find that here. The splits that I have here are Prairie Township and Obeds did one with an 80-20 split. Blendon Township in Westerville is a 75-25. Clinton Township is an 80-20. Prairie Township, is that Columbus? Prairie Township and Columbus is 75-25. Sorry, my email squished. And Scioto Township, Grove City is a 90-10. So this is anywhere in the 20-25 range to be right down the kind of in the range of what they've been dealing
Do
with.
they all take the administration fee out of that?
No.
No, the administration fee always comes off the top, and I don't have that broken down here, but the ones I've seen have gone from usually 2 to 3. Ours is 4, which is bigger, but again, it's not outside. Usually that 5% is what they're playing with between the administrative fee and the JED board. I usually get some money to pay for their expenses. So we're on the high end, but I still think we're in the world. But that always comes off the top to pay for the expenses, and the split's what's left.
Yeah, whatever we do with the splits, I still stand firm on my email the other day with the finance director's recommendation that he doesn't think that 4% is even enough, but he can live with the 4%. So.
Okay, so we'll follow up on that. We have been approached medical marijuana. I know the city attorney sent out a note about that. We did get some feedback. There are rules that have been issued with respect to cultivators. Applications are due in June. I don't think we're going to see any here in the city, at least as far as facilities, but we might get approached regarding dispensaries at some point. And that's really kind of a zoning legal question. And I know that we've had some discussion about it, not extensively, but we have, that will come up.
Yeah,
I called last week on growing it rather than just dispensing it. So.
The reason we're getting a lot of calls about the growing is I think there's some sort of application period that's opening up for the growing. And this is from Sean, because I try to read their website. It's not very well organized. But apparently, in order to get that growing license, yeah, I'm reading. I'm like, I can't figure this out. Maybe you need to sample it before you can read it. But to get that permit to grow, you need to have a letter from a city saying, we're cool with them coming, which is different than us saying, okay, we're not going to stop you if you want to come, but it's an affirmative letter from the jurisdiction saying, we're okay with this cultivation license coming to our city. So that's why they're all calling now, because they're all trying to get places lined up to get that letter. So it's kind of different than incentives. It's different from do everything we can to keep them in around. It's just they need an affirmative letter to get this particular kind of license. And as City Manager Holman mentioned, the next step will be the other kind of businesses that probably have later deadlines and different requirements that I haven't figured out yet.
And Darren, I just add, I believe we determined that the state law would allow us to prohibit that particular, the growing portion, however you want to characterize it, of the medical marijuana uses, if you wanted to. So you could expressly prohibit it, which is different than embracing it or incentivizing it or doing anything, or just leaving it alone to be a state law.
So the state law is the city can't prohibit
Yeah.
growing, but you cannot prohibit the distribution.
Dispensaries have a different
Right.
set of criteria that I believe have not been finalized yet. I think they're still out for comment.
Right.
What isn't now is I think it's 20 or so places around the state licenses where it could be grown. And there's different size growers as well, 2 different sizes.
Yeah. And the reason we want to kind of bring it up is, we don't really know which direction we should be going. If it's we don't want to have marijuana, any sort of marijuana businesses in the city. Darren and Dave figure out if that's possible. That's one direction. If it's, we don't really care, we don't want to ask for it, but if they come, we're fine. That's a different direction that Dave and I can work, but it's just, we don't have any idea policy-wise if there is a sense of council, because we haven't really talked about this at all, so.
In the industrial zoning district, for example, we've gotten several calls. In the industrial zoning district, we don't have a land use category that allows for growing of agricultural products of any kind. So it's just not allowed. Obviously, we have an agricultural zoning district, but you won't find a land use category that says medical marijuana, because nobody has ever put that in the code yet. So we could go any number. We could just, you could say it's an agricultural product that's regulated by the state. You could say, Dave and Darren go figure out whether you can prohibit it. Or you could say, do nothing, let the state worry about it. But I think we're getting a lot of calls because people are looking at those licenses to make their application to the state. And frankly, I think they're going to look for communities that say, yes, we're okay with it, and you could do it here, and they're probably just going to go do it in those locations. So it'd be my guess, rather than forcing an issue.
Question, do you know if the state has any regulations as far as these growers in terms of what kind of security they're supposed to have in place and that kind of thing? That would be one.
I know they do. I don't know what they are, but that's the whole point, is they do have regulations for all. That's the whole point of what they've just come out with in their licensing and things. But I don't know what they are.
Some type of security fencing.
Secure buildings, secure fencing. I think there's different aspects of inspection and that sort of thing. I don't know them all. The website is not the easiest thing to use.
I think what we have to be real careful to make the distinction of is that we're talking here about medical marijuana. We are not talking about marijuana to make people high. And so we're not going to say we're allowing marijuana grow operations and we're going to turn the city of Delaware into some sort of drug ring. This is medicinal use, and there are people suffering, and I don't see what the big hubbub is. It's a plant that has characteristics in it that can ease people's suffering. So I am 100% for it.
Really, my biggest concern is just that there's appropriate security on these facilities.
Absolutely.
Because it's going to be an issue, and if the state doesn't go far enough in regulating that, we may want to add something to that just to make sure that we're not creating a side problem.
Then and another point is that I don't think that the city of Delaware is in a position to turn away industry. And if this is legal and licensed, and we go down the path of examining what type of industry it is, then we're going to end up on a real slippery slope of what happens if some other type of industry comes forward that we don't necessarily agree with. So if it's legal and it meets the criteria.
The only land use point I'd make is if someone asked me to make a determination today, which is appealable to Board of Zoning Appeals and then Common Pleas Court after that, is if somebody wanted to say, I want to do this land use in an M1 or an M2 zoning district, what my letter would say is, you're not allowed to do any agricultural uses in those districts. You mentioned industrial zones, so I just want to clarify that. I think the question probably is more germane to our agricultural zoning districts. Do you agree, Darren?
Yes, and just to add on, and I know very little about the industry, it seems like from what, again, I'll attribute all my knowledge to Sean Hughes, but it seems like a lot of the businesses that are calling are indoor growing facilities.
All of them.
These are cultivators.
Yes.
Cultivators have to
be indoor.
So they are looking for, they're not looking in the agricultural sections, they're looking in the business sections, which are not coded, as Dave says, for agriculture. So it'd be easier if it was growing stuff in a field in an agriculture district. So I think that's kind of part of the interesting scenarios. But if council were to say, well, we don't have any problem with this, I'm sure Dave and I can get our heads together and change things to make it happen. That's a whole other level of.
I mean, if you wanted to, we could add a land use category under some definition to be determined.
Well, I think if we're getting that many phone calls about it, we need to start doing our due diligence and getting it all figured out. You know, what, A, do we want to have this? B, if we do, under what circumstances? And, you know, what are the security requirements? What are the zoning requirements? So.
And I think that's kind of why we wanted to have this conversation, because if council tonight had said, we just don't want it, we don't want that in our community, then that makes our path different than we might want it. Can you figure out how it might work? And you don't want to
leave the code as it is and let the market figure it out.
It seems to me it's an economic development issue, but there's also security concerns and land use concerns. So it's almost as if staff kind of needs to get the facts and give us some options, and then we'll have something to make some decisions from.
I mean, what are you telling these people that are calling? We'll get back with you, or what's your answer right now?
Well, because they're looking in industrial areas, exactly what I just told you. It's not allowed. Because it isn't.
So we'd have to make changes to the code
To allow
permit
it.
Plus you have to affirmatively indicate the city supports the proposal. So there is action that would be required by city council. I think for all intents and purposes, the window is closing here because the deadline for applications for cultivators, and those are the folks who've been calling, is in June, in mid-June. So you've got to have we can.
That may not be the last round of that
Yeah.
in the history of this legislation that was passed by the state legislature. So
But the next set of questions will be dispensaries. And there's somebody who's made an inquiry in the city.
I mean, Darren and Sean have to do a little research as to how much leeway we may or may not have to even regulate those. Typically, a state regulation would preempt us from typically saying something's prohibited if the state law said it's permitted under certain circumstances. So this is a little bit unusual law in that regard from a land use perspective.
So what do you need from us tonight then?
Just, want to get some feedback from you as to what you thought in general philosophically about it. And
I'm all for pursuing it and see,
Okay.
I guess I'm not against the industry coming to town.
Okay,
That's what you're
yeah,
asking, yes.
and then we can figure out if there's some of the means to do that.
But if all they're asking for by the June 30th deadline is our support to get their permit, they're not at the point of building a facility and all that at that point. So, I mean, do we need to make a determination tonight? Yes, we're going to accept these kind of businesses, and then we just need to get to work on our land use and other kind of things.
I don't think you have to make it necessarily tonight. It would just be good to get some feedback from council.
Just trying to know
what direction. I mean, if we're opposed to it, we don't want to deal with it, then we.
I mean, if you affirmatively look at this as an economic development opportunity that Delaware would like to have one of these licenses for the cultivation, hearing that that's something that you affirmatively want would be helpful tonight, because we may have to start going a whole different path, because as David's been saying, right now it's not allowed. If you're like, we want it, we got some things we got to try to change and look into seeing whether we want to do that, but
not allowed in the M1 and M2 district.
So, I mean, I think we just need to say, yeah, I'm okay with pursuing this, or no, I'm not.
I'm good.
Yeah, I would support it.
I guess what we're looking for
You're
is
no?
the land use concern, security concern, things we need to know.
Yeah, I mean, I reserve the right, when I hear the
Approving
details
anything.
of whatever the
Right.
proposal is, to say, maybe this isn't right, but just in concept, I'm willing to pursue it.
no, that's exactly what we just wanted here, because I didn't have a sense as to which way council wanted to go. So that's.
Okay, that's that. And then the water plant dedication and education center set for June 24th. We'll get information out to you. And I know most of you, it was hard to get everybody. Hopefully, Lacey, you couldn't. I know you had the conflict. So
9 to 10 a.m.
I think it's probably 10 till noon or something. Yeah, to set the program. It'll be in the morning. And we'll open it up to the public and provide tours and whatnot. So that's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Schaefer. Council comments?
I can go first tonight.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything, thank you anyway.
Mr. Hellinger.
Only thing is, just everyone remember financial disclosure documents for ethics, so due a week from today.
Thank you. Mr. Rohr?
Nothing, ma'am.
Mrs. Keller?
Just a question about the giant flame that was found in my ward for several weeks. So when that came before the planning commission, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't recall them mentioning that folks near where I live would be able to go outside and roast hot dogs.
You can see it from Central Avenue. all the way
Yeah,
up
I
to
mean,
Kroger.
the noise, people were alarmed, and I don't recall them, I recall them saying, "You'll hardly notice we're here."
I don't recall a flare being mentioned, but I'd have to go back in the file and just make sure it wasn't in there someplace, but I don't recall that.
So
So,
what can we?
It is temporary only when they're needing to bleed the line essentially.
I just feel misled. That it would have been nice to have the information that there would be a very large, very loud flame burning 24 hours a day for several weeks at a time. That would have been relevant to know because it is close to a residential area. I did get lots of complaints and people were concerned. And it was hot and loud. And they made no mention of that during their approval process that I can recall.
Did they even
We did
come?
get a notice that we sent out a press release that said there would be intermittent spurts of rain.
But when they were asking for the approval to put it there,
Oh, I don't know about that.
if we could go back and look and see if a giant ball of fire was mentioned.
It's a new festival.
Mentioned in the press
We could look at that, Councilwoman.
Just saying.
I think we could also, ask Columbia Gas to let us know if there's a regular schedule or how intermittent this is going to be moving forward.
Because
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have that information because perhaps there could have been a different location for that. And so close to people's houses because like my eyebrows are starting to grow back. But. All right, that's all I have.
Mr. Jones?
I just want to say a quick thank you to Director Brad Stan and his crew, who I had 2 issues with water in my ward last week, and contacted Brad, and they helped me knock it out very quickly. So I'll say thank you, Brad, and put that on the record.
All right.
That's it.
Saturday morning, I was asked to do some judging over at the Eagles for speeches, God, Flag, and Country for students from all over the state of Ohio. And boy, it really restored my faith in the youth. These kids were phenomenal. I kind of dreaded getting up Saturday morning, having to get dressed up and go to this, but 3 of them brought me to tears. So I was very impressed, and from here they go on to national. So I'm really thankful that the Eagles does that. And then Sunday morning, it was yesterday, I don't even know what day it is, St. Peter's celebrated 200 years. So I went to service yesterday morning for them, and that was very nice
I've been
also.
in that church. It's a great church to go
It
into.
is gorgeous. Yeah, very nice. I was touched. And I will be out of town Saturday. I'm in DC, and then next week I'm in Florida, but I'm available. Saturday will not be available by text or anything. I'll be busy with my veterans. And then next weekend I'll be in Florida with my parents for their 50th anniversary. Oh, yes, and then we had a wonderful meeting with Mayor Ginther Monday last week. He was here for an hour and a half, and as far as I can remember, I don't remember a Columbus mayor ever coming to Delaware before, but it was a wonderful meeting. He was very impressed with Delaware, wanted to see where our growth's going to be, what we have, what we're doing. It was very, very nice.
And Unity House was.
Oh, yeah,
dedication.
it's a busy weekend this weekend.
Friday night, despite all the rain.
Yeah.
Re-entry house right next to the Family Promise.
Okay, with that, we'll take a short 5-minute break and we'll go into executive session. So you're all excused.
Do you want to just do the motion before we go into the break so we don't have to, because Elaine will be here? You want to move to the executive session for me?
I move to go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22G for the reasons stated on the agenda.
Second.
Roll call.
Keller? Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. So we'll come back at 8:30.
I figured I'd be late.